Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
First of all, I'd like to thank all of you by whose efforts last night's public program was executed. It was particularly enlivening that there were many newcomers. It's always inspiring to see new people come to Krishna consciousness. For that purpose also our devotees, that means you, all of you, you go out and you distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. And particularly from tomorrow all over the world, the annual December marathon of distributing Srila Prabhupada's books will begin. So I exhort or request all of you to see what you can do and try your best to make Srila Prabhupada pleased by distributing as many of his books as possible. I know for many of you this is the best time of the year. I think especially the ladies as they go out in the colleges and distribute many of Srila Prabhupada's books. So let us pray to Srila Prabhupada for his mercy to execute his service in this regard. We can feel that gradually there's energy building up in Salem. As people in the town and in the district and outlying areas, more and more they get to know about this project. And now the temple's coming up. And this is all very favorable for preaching Krishna consciousness. And I trust that you'll find that it will gradually, people become more open and more willing to take these books. As I said in the beginning of my talk last night, it's actually quite surprising that considering the degradation of the modern age, how so many people are eager to come and hear a lecture on the title, How to See God. There's one famous Baba who's based in North India, mostly speaks in Hindi, who gives public lectures on things like how to sleep better. Well, he teaches yoga, physical exercises. And huge crowds assemble. I'm not accusing him. I don't think he's a very great teacher. He doesn't say that he's teaching anything spiritual in particular. He just says he's teaching people how to get better health, that's all. So in that regard, I don't have any particular complaint about Ramdev Baba, that's his name. But we can see that there's something how to be free from stress by doing yoga, how to have better eyesight and all this kind of thing, that so many people will like to come. So it's gratifying that people, at least some people will come to hear about how to see God and patiently listen for an hour or so on the subject. And from the questions we can understand that people have no idea whatsoever about this subject. No, actually that's incorrect. I have to change that statement. They have some ideas, but they're all very wrong ideas. So now I'm going to speak on Sri Vishnu Sahasranama. And this is actually very important to give some real idea of who is God, how He is God, why He is God, what are His characteristics. Otherwise there's so many misunderstandings about God. Probably the most misused word in any language is the word God, closely followed by words like love, compassion, and so on. All these words like love, compassion, peace, they can only be understood if we first of all understand what is the meaning of God. So anyone who speaks about love, peace, compassion, gratitude, forgiveness, and so on, without specifically stating how all these qualities can only actually be manifest in relation to Krishna, They're actually just cheating people. Of course, such statements could be interpreted in a Krishna conscious way, but without specifically putting in the context of Krishna consciousness, it just leaves it open to the imagination and interpretation of the reader or hearer. So people who are in Krishna consciousness, they may think, oh, this is Krishna conscious. And others who are not in Krishna consciousness thinks, oh, it's just a nice saying, and this way you please everyone except Krishna. People are wasting their human form of life without knowledge of Krishna. So to take the position of a spiritual teacher, but not to teach people about Krishna, is the worst violence, even if you talk about compassion and love. Especially if someone has knowledge of Krishna, but fails to give it, and instead talks or platitudes about love and compassion. We can understand they have no love or compassion. They're simply envious of others because they don't want to give them Krishna. So who is Krishna? There are so many misunderstandings about God. What was it someone said yesterday? God can only be seen in dreams, citing the evidence of a couple of expired, gone to hell beefeaters. In the North India, they say for someone who's died, they say, well, it's Sanskrit, Swaga Prapta, it means they attained heaven. Or sometimes Ganga Prapta, I suppose, especially if they die in Varanasi. Or among Vaishnavas you can say Golok Prapta or Vaikuntha Prapta. But these people, they exactly fitted the description of what I read yesterday morning from Srila Prabhupada's purports in the Sri Upanishad. That they go to the darkest region of hell after finishing their spiritual master business, which is conducted simply for sense gratification. So they are Naraka Prapta. They attain they are Narak Prapta, they go to hell. For misunderstanding and misrepresenting Krishna and the science of God. Now, it's not surprising that there are misunderstandings about Krishna, because he's very difficult to understand. The next name we have here is Ugrah, which means formidable, violent, cruel, horrible. Ugraman. We don't expect to hear that about God, especially Krishna. Krishna is very sweet. He's very loving. He's very beautiful. But he is, everything is within Krishna. So he's very horrible also. If we ask someone, what do you think of God? He's horrible. Yes, 10 out of 10. Well, it's not the quality that we always emphasize. How is that? Well, that's described in a shloka by Sridhar Swami, the commentator on Bhagavatam. Ugro pyanugra eva yang swabhaktanam nrikeshari keshariva svaputanam anyesham ugra vikramaha. He's talking about Nrsimhadev, who is the form of Vishnu who Sridhar Swami particularly worships. So he says that just as a lioness is very affectionate toward her cubs, but very fearsome to pretty much everyone else. So in the same way, Nrsimhadev is very fierce to the non-devotees, but he's very loving and kind to his devotees. Big, powerful animals, like an elephant, can be afraid of a lion. That is a frequent theme in Indian literature, or used to be before all the lions and elephants pretty much got wiped out, of lions fighting with elephants. They're both very powerful and majestic animals. The elephant's not so majestic, but is used by aristocracy, but is certainly very powerful. Just as the skit was going on last night, I thought, well, what do villagers do when an elephant goes in the sugarcane field and starts devastating it? You just can't go with a stick and say, hey, get out of here. You have to bring a whole group of villagers with sticks, especially burning sticks. Elephants are afraid of fire. But in the meantime, while you're getting all that organized, the elephant devastated all the agricultural efforts for that year. But even more powerful is the lion or the lioness. That great powerful elephant is afraid of the lion. But the little lion cub, who's not at all powerful yet, who's not much bigger than a domestic cat, is not at all afraid of the lioness, because there's an intimate connection. So devotees are protected by the Lord, who may appear very horrible to the non-devotees, which is maybe one reason why many people, they don't like to believe in God, because if they believe, then they're in trouble. Actually, they are in trouble, but their non-believing in God is something like the ostrich's response to danger. The ostrich is a big bird, so it's very favorite of meat eaters. One ostrich is like a whole shop full of chickens. So if the ostrich is attacked, it waddles along. But then when it finds out that, well, I can't waddle fast enough to get away, it puts its head in the sand. Then it can't see that my attackers are coming to kill me. So the atheists, they want to live a demoniac life. A horrible, violent, cruel life. Ugrah life. So Krishna responds, Ye yata mang prapadyante tangs tathaiva bhajamyaham. He reciprocates with everyone. So for those who are engaged in giving trouble to others, Krishna gives them a practical lesson in how to do so, by giving them trouble. So understanding that he is terrible, the atheists, they prefer not to believe in him. But the devotees may also like to see him like that. In Bhaktivedanta Mana, Srila Prabhupada's temple near London in England, when I was there, must have been 1975 or 1976, when I was there, a huge painting was put on the wall. It was a perfect facsimile, or maybe, I don't think it was the original, of the painting of Nrsimhadev ripping with his transcendental nails the stomach of Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu vakshashila tankanakhalaya. That painting, that the artist who was painting that, she first brought it to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, more blood. Should put more blood. As you can see blood spurting everywhere. So she put more blood. More red paint, but it represents blood. Not actual blood. We're not doing human sacrifice here. So she brought it back to Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada said, more blood. So, when God gets nasty, he's really nasty. So that painting was put there, and some devotees were apprehensive about that. Well, when members of the public have no exposure to Krishna consciousness come and they see this, what are we going to tell them? On the altar are the exquisitely, transcendently beautiful Sri Sri Radha Gokula Ananda. So we can explain to people that this is God, the embodiment of all beauty and sweetness. But if they turn their head 90 degrees, then they'll see Nrsimhadev. So what do we tell people? Well, we can tell people, there's also God. If you don't like this God, you get this God. Same God, but he reciprocates differently with different people. Even sometimes the devotees, they like to see that form, the violent form of Krishna. Kshatriyas are powerful and noble people, but they like violence. A proper Kshatriya doesn't become violent unnecessarily, but they do like to fight, as stated by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. Sukhina kshatriya partha labante yudham idrisham. Happy are the kshatriyas to whom come fighting opportunities You can just imagine so many men in the Indian army, they must be frustrated like anything because they're training all their life for fighting, but all they get to do is play ping pong in the barracks. Well, sometimes they get sent off to the LOC, line of control. You don't know that? He doesn't read the newspapers. He's pure. The Pakistan border in Jammu and in Kashmir. Sorry, not in Jammu. And there's also in Arunachal Pradesh. There's the Chinese, but even then you don't get a lot of fighting. Bhishma, he's a Kshatriya. Kshatriya means has full Kshatriya spirit. So he many times saw Krishna in a very, Krishna in approaching Bhishma would do so in a very respectful mood. Bhishma, he loved Krishna. He's a pure devotee of Krishna. But being imbued with the Kshatriya spirit, he also wanted to see Krishna in fighting, angry mood. So he got the chance. Krishna's one famous name is Ratangapani, the one who has in his hand a piece of broken wheel. Famous name means here in South India, I think especially in Tamil Nadu. It's not so well known elsewhere. So he went to attack Bhishma with the finding. He vowed he won't pick up any weapon in the fight. So there must have been so many swords just scattered around from so many dead people at the end of the day. But he picked up a piece of broken chariot wheel and went to attack Bhishma in full anger. There are a few paintings of this that, what's his name? V.S. Sharma, I think he painted one also. But the many painters, traditional, they always show Krishna almost expressionless, but just with a mild smile. So he presents him like that, but it's quite inappropriate for this scene. Seems like the idea that, well, Krishna is transcendental and he never gets too emotional. But the look on Krishna's face should be one of extreme anger. He wants to kill Bhishma. His face is spattered with blood and perspiration mixed up with the dust of the battlefield. Really Ugrah. This is how Bhishma was very happy to see Krishna. This idea that God always has to be very beautiful and mild and sweet and pleasing, that is a misunderstanding. Akhila Rasamrita Murti. He is the form of all kinds of nectarian rasas. So that feeling which arises, that experience which arises from wonder. So we find even among the secondary rasas which are listed among them is bhiti, which means fear, bhibhatsa, which means the sense of horror or disgust. Krishna is the fountainhead of all feelings. But when Krishna is horrible, it's also very relishable for those who are devotees. And for those who are not devotees, well, they have to suffer. Krishna is violent and cruel, it may seem to them. Not actually so, but it appears to them like that. Because when there is some impediment given to their sense gratification, they think, oh, this is very horrible. This God? Ugh, don't like God. Just like this question came up last night. Well, if there's God, why does He allow this terrorism in the world? Rascal doesn't think he's also a terrorist. If he's eating meat, then he's a terrorist. He's also paying for the animals to be tortured and slaughtered. So they think that God, what do you want from God? He'll make a nice slaughterhouse for us. We'll go to heaven and we'll eat lots of beef there. This is their idea. So for such rascaldom, the Lord very mercifully becomes violent and cruel towards such persons. Even the demigods, they're in this material world. They have some material desire. They're also devotees, but they have material desire. That is why after Nrsimhadev killed Hiranyakashipu, all the demigods were afraid to approach Nrsimha. He was still angry. His anger didn't die down. Immediately. He was truly angry. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada would get angry at a disciple and then immediately he'd get back to normal. So he exhibited that anger to teach them. But in the case of Nrsimhadev, he was really angry. It wasn't just something for a second or two. It was real severe anger, and it didn't go away. Only when Prahlad came, then he felt very happy. So generally, the Lord is very tolerant with the material desires of the demigods, because he knows, well, there's some kind of devotees and they're doing what they can. But this time, he was so angry, the demigods were afraid. Even Lakshmi was afraid, but that's a different case. But when Prahlad went, very nice. Now Prahlad has come. He's completely free from material desire. So the demigods, they are appointed representatives of the Supreme Lord. They oversee the functions of the universe. How do they do that? Kapila Dev explains. He says that from fear of me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the wind blows, the sun heats, Indra sends rain, Agni burns, and death wanders around. Death is wandering around looking whose time is up. Then again, in the Bhagavatam, the same thing more or less the same thing. The verse comes up elsewhere in the Bhagavatam, comes in the Upanishads also. It's from fear of him. Those who are pious, but not pure in love of Krishna, they act out of fear of him. And Nrsimhadev is particularly fierce. Kalki avatar is particularly fierce. So various avatars, they manifest particular features of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna is the original supreme form of all the forms of the Personality of Godhead. Because in him we will find all different manifestations of all different activities and moods. He's very sweet as a young child of Yashoda and Nanda. He's most romantic as the lover of the gopis and of the queens of Dwarka. And he is furious and terrible in killing the soldiers of the demons. He doesn't do this all the time. He gives instructions in Bhagavad Gita, but those who don't want to accept it, he gives the chance to follow Bhagavad Gita, but those who don't want to accept it, then for them, as he says in Bhagavad Gita, Mrityu sarvaharashchaham, I come in the form of death and take everything away. Those who refuse to submit to his love, his beauty and his kindness, they are forced to submit to his supreme nastiness. That is especially meant for the sinful people. Some religions, they emphasize the nastiness of God. The transcendental nastiness, we should say, which is kindness also. But they emphasize that you have to fear God. If you don't do what your mother says, God will punish you. You have to be afraid of God. This is the mood they inculcate. Whereas the Vaishnavas, they inculcate the mood of pure, sweet, simple love and appreciation of his sweet personality. But persons who themselves are nasty, they take God to be the supreme nasty in a truly nasty sense. And they have invented some idea that if you don't believe in God in the way they believe in him, then you have to burn in hell forever by the grace of God. This is a most gross misrepresentation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They say there is Satan in the world. If there is any Satan, he's given them this very wrong idea that God is so cruel and nasty that he will burn you in hell forever. Certainly, Bhagavan has his Ugrah, or violent aspect. But madhurja bhagavatasa, the essence of Bhagavan's being Bhagavan is his sweetness. So, dalitam madhuram, this Vallabhacharya says, even when he's smashing others, that's also very sweet. That's narrated in the Nectar of Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. The bedtime stories of Krishna told by Mother Yashoda. So she told the story of Prahlad and Nrsimha, of how Nrsimha came and ripped Hiranyakashipu to pieces. It's quite a violent bedtime story, but it's... And as baby Krishna listened, his eyes grew wide. But he didn't manifest the Nrsimha form. That would have been too astonishing for Mother Yashoda. Would have caused rasabhas. It would have been rasabhas on the path of Krishna, so he didn't do it. But once when Krishna as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited the house of Srivas Thakur, he asked him to recite Vishnu Sahasranama. So all of you who think I'm bogus for speaking on Vishnu Sahasranama can think that, well, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu liked it also. And probably recited it daily, because it used to be the standard practice of Brahmanas, at least in his Grihastha Leela. Jagannath Mishra would have done so. Everyone did. Everyone, all the Brahmanas in India did. Yeah. So when he came to the name Narasimha Vapu, who is the form of man and lion, which comes just very near the beginning, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became, that's called Avesh. He became absorbed in the mood of Narasimha. And in that mood of Narasimha, he ran in the street shouting, I will kill all the Yavanas, which at that time Yavana was understood to mean Muslim, actually. So all the people there, they became very afraid to see this form. Can you imagine? You're just walking down the street, going about your day's business, and Nrsimhadev comes running down the street in an angry mood, ready to kill. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, seeing that everyone was afraid, he came out of that mood. And he came back to the house of Srivas. And he expressed sorrow and said, well, I shouldn't have done that. To give fear to others is not good. But Srivas quite properly corrected Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and said, no, that whoever saw you like that, they're certainly delivered from material existence. So that is the difference between these terrorists and calculars and other nasty people who are violent and cruel, and Krishna when he is violent and cruel. By Krishna's apparent violence and cruelty, whoever sees that, or whoever becomes an object of it, is delivered from material existence. So we worship Krishna as the supreme sweet, the supreme beautiful, the supreme loving, the supreme merciful, and also the supremely violent, cruel, and nasty. Hare Krishna. Yeah, how to see God? Well, if you don't want to follow the Bhagavad Gita process, then you'll get to see Him anyway, in another way. Don't worry, you will get to see Him. Those who are eager to see Him in His beautiful threefold bending form, they eventually get to see that form. Those who wish to see Him in His form as Rama, with the bow and quivers, fighting Ravana, or as the king of Ayodhya, they get to see Him in that form, if they're actually sincere to do so. Those who want to see Him in His four-handed form as the Lord of Vaikuntha, the Lord of Lakshmi, they get to see that form. And for those who have no interest in seeing any of these forms, they get to see Him in His violent, cruel, nasty form as death. So, which form are we all aiming for here? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu particularly came to reveal the most secret loving pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan. that is described in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. We shall have to begin at the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. Janmadhyasya yataha. He is the source of everything. Everything exists in Him. Everything ultimately enters into Him. So let us understand Him step by step. Hare Krishna. Any question, please? Hare.
I'm 45 years old and I realize God in the form of happiness and distress, and I see others in the younger age, they are realizing God, and different people are realizing God in different ages, and why these differences are there? Why everyone doesn't realize God in the same way? So why these differences are there? Brahmacharis are realizing in younger age, they are realizing early.
Well, one thing to understand is that although someone may be 45 years old in this body, it's only one body. We've been through many, many bodies. You say that in English? There's something missed? Okay. People can take to Krishna consciousness at any age. Those who have the opportunity to do so, they can take to it. So, maybe one reason you didn't take to Krishna consciousness earlier was because there was no opportunity here in Salem. Devotees didn't come here until recently. But it's also generally true that as we get older, we become more set in our ways. Do you know what that means? Set in our ways. We're not so psychologically flexible. Please don't lean on the pillar there. If you want, you can sit down, but leaning on the pillar doesn't look very respectful. Anyway, you can also realize God by the same process that the younger people are doing. Once Srila Prabhupada was asked by a visitor that why are there so many young people among your disciples? Srila Prabhupada answered by posing another question. He said, why are there so many young people in the university? And the questioner responded, well, that's the age for learning. And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, so this is also a learning process. People are open to learning at that age. So many people have come when they're young. The older people can also study in the university. But generally younger people do so. Those who are older who take up studies, they generally do so with more seriousness than those who are young. Because they've seen more of life and how miserable it is, and they're more, I'm talking about studying Krishna consciousness. In the university they're going, it's not just, because every young person goes, but they have a specific plan to improve their life by education. Those who take to Krishna consciousness later, we would hope that they do so having been kicked very thoroughly many times by Maya. So with great determination to make a solution to the problems of life, they should take to Krishna consciousness. Yeah, anything else? Yeah. No, I wasn't aware of that. We won't find that in the standard Sanskrit edition, I don't think. No. There are so many different editions of Mahabharata, including the TV edition. So there are different embellishments which people add. Maybe you heard it from Atmatat. He was very good in embellishing stories. Hare Krishna!